The Tackle Box Podcast.
You can murder a hater, but you can't murder hate.
And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind.
Dollars bring dignity.
He certainly has also sparked controversy with many of his views in the past.
If you have hate in your heart, let it out.
I hate you.
I'd rather die than be a slave.
The only difference between us is the way we think.
A church in Oak Park recently declared it was, quote, fasting from whiteness for Lent. First United Church of Oak Park states on its website, quote, we will not be using any music or liturgy written or composed by white people.
Welcome back to the Tackle Box Podcast. I'm Eric Edwards. This episode is about the church, about history, and about why some things keep happening, even when everybody swears they're trying to change. The episode is called Church on Fire, featuring the White League and Groundhog Day. And trust me, the title fits. When I say the church is on fire, I'm not talking about flames. I'm talking about pressure, tension, old problems that never got fixed, race, power, belonging, the stuff people whisper about, but never say out loud. To understand why the fire is burning, we got to go back to a moment when the country was trying to decide what it wanted to be and who it wanted to be for.
Commence au festival.
Before we talk about the church, let me take you to a different kind of fire. One that burned in the streets long before it burned in the sanctuary. A fire about power, belonging, and who gets to run the show. This takes us to New Orleans, almost 10 years after the Civil War, when the country tried to rebuild itself, and not everybody agreed on what that rebuilding should look like. New Orleans, 1874. The city was tense. People were angry and divided. Black folks had finally gained rights, and some white folks didn't like that. They wanted things to go back to the way they were before the war. 2 years earlier, in 1872, Louisiana held a governor's election. William Pitt Kellogg, a Republican, won, but the election was messy. People argued about cheating and violence. Kellogg's opponent, John McHenry, claimed victory too. He didn't just complain. He tried to take over the government by force. In 1873, he formed a militia to seize New Orleans, but that plan failed. Around the same time, in another part of Louisiana, Christopher Columbus Nash gathered armed men to push out Republican officials. That led to the Colfax Massacre, where many black folks were killed. After that, Nash helped create the White League, former Confederate soldiers who wanted to stop Reconstruction and take power back for white people. They didn't hide it. They said it out loud with their whole chest. By 1874, the White League got stronger. They expected a shipment of weapons because they wanted to take over New Orleans and put McHenry in office. The Metropolitan Police found out, led by James Longstreet, a former Confederate general who switched sides and supported Reconstruction. Most of the men fighting with him were black state militia members. They knew what was at stake. The police tried to block the White League from reaching the waterfront at Canal Street, but the White League sent out a call for help. More than 5,000 men gathered at the statue of Henry Clay. They left to get weapons, and came back armed. Frederick Nash Ogden was put in charge of the White League's forces. The police told him to go home. They refused, and that set it off. The fighting was fierce. The police and militia were outnumbered. Some police officers switched sides mid-battle. The defenders were pushed back to the Federal Custom House, where U.S. troops were stationed. The fighting lasted for days. 11 members of the police and militia were killed, 60 wounded. 21 White League members killed, 19 wounded. 3 days later, federal troops arrived and ended the standoff. Kellogg was restored as governor. The White League had to leave the city. But outside New Orleans, they had already taken control over most of the countryside. Their violence had worked. Federal troops stayed until 1877, when Reconstruction ended. Years later, in 1891, the city put up a monument to honor the black state militia members. No, not really. They put up a monument to honor the White League. Said they had restored the government to white people, called the Republicans and the U.S. government usurpers. That monument stayed up until April 24th, 2017. That's the White League and the Battle of Liberty Place. And even though it happened a long time ago, the ideas behind it didn't disappear. They just changed shape. You're listening to the Dacklebox Podcast. Now let's bring this back to the church, because what happens in the streets doesn't stay in the streets. The same arguments about power and belonging mobbed straight through the church doors and popped a squat down in the first pew like they owned the place. And that's where we start. Dacklebox Nation. The white church sees everything. The anger, fear, harm. Now some pray about it. Some preach. Others stay quiet. And some nod along. And some bless it. They use God talk to make it sound okay. Use sermons to make it sound normal. Use scripture to make it sound holy. That's how bad ideas get protected, and the history around it makes the quiet louder. Monuments that erase black resistance, sermons that skip justice, churches that talk about heaven but ignore the hurt outside their doors. People say the church is neutral. It's not. Silence is a choice. And the white church still makes that choice. Truth or comfort, prophetic or popular, holy or harmless. And to understand why the white church and the black church move so differently, boxers, we gotta talk about how the church gets separated. Because it didn't happen by accident. People were separated on purpose. By rules, danger, force. Black folks weren't allowed to worship with white folks, and when they tried, they got pushed out, ignored, punished. So black folks built their own churches, because they had to. Only place they could lead, be safe, belong. And the white church stayed white because who wanted to. Made rules about who could join, who could lead, what to teach, and what to skip. Those choices became habits. Habits became traditions. Traditions became the way things still look. Dr. King said it plain. It is appalling that the most segregated hour of Christian America is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. Same God, different rooms. Tacklebox Nation. Y'all said something simple. Most people want a choice about being together. They want to decide. And if equality requires integration, then folks who want equality will deal with being pushed into the same space to get it. But in places where equality doesn't feel like a fight, like churches, people don't feel that push. Churches feel like their own little world, their own rules. And because leaders and traditions already tell folks where they fit, there's less reason to mix. So people don't mix. Not out of hate, it's out of habit. And y'all notice something else. More folks are integrating, slowly, but it's happening. Usually the bigger ones, smaller ones stay the same. Not because they're keeping people out, because small groups change slowly. People know each other. They got routines, habits, and habits are hard to break. Now let me tell you something about the way I talk when I'm making a point. Sometimes I use generalizations, not because everybody fits. I'm describing a pattern. Patterns are real, even when exceptions exist. When I say a lot of black churches are conservative, I don't mean everyone. I don't mean all. I don't mean always. I don't talk in extremes. I mean the pattern is strong enough that you can feel it. Walk into black churches on a Sunday and it's right there. The tradition, the caution, the respectability, the sense that safety comes from staying close to what feels familiar. When people hear a generalization they don't like, they don't argue with the facts. They argue with the feeling, because the truth stings. It's like saying, black folks listen to R&B and rap. Not everybody, but the pattern is there. But when I talk about the church, especially the black church, I'm talking about identity, memory, survival, pride. The place where people learn how to be strong, polite, grateful, careful. Where people are taught that safety comes from staying close to power, even when that power doesn't treat them well. So when I say many black churches would vote Republican if racism wasn't in the way, people don't just hear the words, they hear the challenge. The suggestion that maybe the church isn't as free-thinking as it believes, and that's where it gets uncomfortable. Because deep down, folks know the institutions they trust don't always deliver. The speeches don't always turn into change. The people asking for the support don't always show up. Loyalty is expected, not always respected. When I say that out loud, people don't get mad because it's wrong. They get mad because it's right. Because it touches something they've been avoiding. Makes them look at the gap between what they hope for and what they get. I'm not saying this to be extreme, not to paint every church with the same brush. I'm saying it to start a real conversation. Shake the table. Stop pretending everything is fine. You gotta stir the pot to see what floats to the top. And that's why the church feels like it's on fire. Not because people don't care, they care a lot. So much, they're scared to admit what's broken, what needs to change, that the things they're holding on to might be the things holding them back.
What you fear, and it's a deep guilt thing, that white folks suffer. You are afraid that if we ever come to power, we will do to you and your fathers what you and your people have done to us. And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind, and that is not necessarily the mind of black people.
You're listening to the Dacklebox Podcast. This shift is something lighter, but shows the same pattern. How people repeat things long after the meaning is gone. Pause for the Groundhog. Gobbler's Knob, Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, 1887. Y'all know what it is. If the groundhog saw its shadow and got shook, winter lasts 6 more weeks. No shadow, spring came early. The version most people knew came from Clymer Frias, a newspaper editor who convinced local businessmen and groundhog hunters to turn it into a yearly event. They called themselves the Punxsutawney Groundhog Club. But February 2nd mattered long before anybody cared about a groundhog. It sat between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Old traditions paid attention to that moment. The Celts celebrated Imbolc, the beginning of spring. Christianity turned Imbolc into Candlemas. Some believed a Sunday Candlemas meant 40 more days of cold. Then the Germans added their twist. Said the day was sunny only if animals like badgers saw their shadows. When German families came to America, they brought that belief. But instead of badgers, they used groundhogs because, well, groundhogs were everywhere in Pennsylvania. And here's the funny part. Groundhogs didn't come out in February to predict the weather. They came out looking for a mate. Poked their heads out, looked around, and went right back underground until March. But people kept the tradition anyway, not because it was scientific. It gave them something to look forward to in the middle of winter, a sense of connection, hope that spring was coming, even if the groundhog didn't know a thing about the weather. And that's the lesson. People repeat things because they want comfort. Meaning, a sign that things can get better, even if it's just Phil looking for a girlfriend. You're listening to the Dacklebox Podcast. The Church, the White League, Groundhog Day. 3 different stories, same pattern. The problems aren't mysterious. They're not hidden. They're not complicated. They're repeated, protected, passed down like tradition. The church isn't blocked by outsiders. It's blocked by its own behavior. People see the issues, name them privately, work around them publicly, but don't correct them. Avoidance becomes normal. Normal becomes acceptable. Acceptable becomes defended. Silence instead of honesty. Habit instead of responsibility. Image instead of integrity. And the outcomes? They match the choices. This isn't confusion. This isn't pressure. This isn't, we didn't know. This is choosing not to fix what's broken. Choosing the pattern. Choosing the fire. And that's real. Thank you for listening to the Dacklebox Podcast. This episode was narrated, written, produced, and scored by Eric Edwards. That's me. Special acknowledgement to Aaron Glover and Ula Pinion for their contributions. This show is executed by Truth and Substance. Listen, the only difference between us is the way we think. You're listening to the Tackle Box Podcast.
Well, isn't that special?